all persons bound by reconnaissance or otherwise having to do with the Honorable Judges of the Courts of Oyer and Terminer, General Jail Delivery, and Quarter Sessions of the Peace in and for the County of Philadelphia, holding here this day, may now appear, and they shall be heard. God save the Commonwealth and this honorable court. Be seated, please.
We Americans envision our system of justice this way. Each man innocent until proven guilty. Each man enjoying equal justice under the law, regardless of his financial or racial status. While these guarantees are underscored in the Bill of Rights, we increasingly hear from critics who contend that too often there exists a double standard of justice, one for the affluent, another for the poor. The 14th Amendment to our Constitution solemnly guarantees equal protection to every citizen. One man designated to provide such protection, the policeman, enters our consciousness early. Most children, especially those of middle-class families, are taught to see the policeman as a benevolent figure. But many children of the poor have witnessed or experienced a less kindly portrait. To them, the policeman not only seems to lack any understanding of their lives, but is all too often a weapon of harassment and enraged brutality. One authority, the research director of the National Council on Crime and Delinquency, an organization composed of eminent judges and law officials, believes there is a double standard in the approach of many policemen toward children of upper and lower income families. He is Vincent O'Leary.
Policeman observes something happen, and now he has to decide, do I arrest this boy or not? If the boy is able to say, yeah, my father lives here, if he's indeed able to say he has a father, it makes quite a difference. I go to this school. I'm dressed this way. How that act is then interpreted is quite different than I have no father, and I look surly. Indeed, I may have a different color. That decision, then, is a key decision. In some states, up to, what, 75% of the children arrested are sent home. And so the question, you see, who gets sent home, who comes into the system? And that's, I think most people would argue for that kind of police discretion, but it is a discretion, I think, that most fair observers would say would be against the poor.
When these children of the poor are placed in custody, they are often dispatched, if they live in New York, to an institution innocently called Youth House. This detention pen holds 560 prisoners aged 7 to 16 years. One youngster, since released, describes what many have termed typical abuses at Youth House.
When I reached 7th grade in junior high school, 71, I didn't like the school system there, and I was leaving school. I was going out dancing. When I used to be in school, I used to be running around, walking around from class to class. And someone in the school talked my mother into taking me to court, family court. So they brought me down there, and she took me to the intake room, and they spoke to her, and they asked me to go in. They told me, we think the youth house is the best place for you. You will learn something. You'll come out being a man. What do you think? I told them, well, you people are running the show, so do what you think is right. So they sent me upstairs to the judge. The judge told me, we just got the papers from the intake room, and they think you should go to youth house. So remand. They remanded me to a youth house. When I was there for about a week or so, I got privileged to work in the kitchen. So I was working on there one day, so one of the kitchen men there, one of the employees, came up to me and told me, let's get in the back room. I said, what for? He says, let's get in the back room. So I said, myself, this guy must be crazy. I asked him again, for what? He says, we'll go in the back room and have some intercourse. I said, I think you better call my dormitory and send me upstairs. He said, if you don't go in the back room with me, I'll tell the supervisor that you were caught stealing, and I'll make sure you won't eat anymore while you're here. I said, it doesn't make me any difference, just send me upstairs. So he called my supervisor, and I was brought upstairs, and I told him what happened down there. And he just laughed and said, well, you ain't the first one,
The youth has testified that supervisors exhibited brutality in other ways. One morning, after he and a friend had messed up their beds as a lark, as he puts it, he was made aware that his supervisor's reaction was not quite so whimsical.
He hit me and I fell to the floor and my glasses fell. Then he began to kick me. I tried to block myself, but he was a heavy guy. He must have been 6 feet tall and weighed 190 pounds. So he just kept on kicking me and giving me knee drops. Then he got up and he said, now the next time you do that, I'm gonna kill you. So remember that.
Because of such charges, New York City's Office of Probation will take over the operation of Youth House. But a basic injustice remains, according to psychologist Larry Cole, director of the youth agency, LEAP.
There's a philosophy that's prevailing that says that there are our kids and those kids. If there are kids, then we have to take care of them and provide good services for them, and if they need psychologists or doctors or college or cars or Sweet 16 parties or whatever, if it's our kids, they get them. If it's those kids, it's another world. These are kids who come from the moon, and they have no relationship to us at all. They represent some kind of threat because the newspapers are constantly talking about them. And it's as simple as that. There's a definite double standard.
Those who are young and members of both racial and economic minorities charge that the most direct callousness has occurred at the police precinct level.
But while I was over there, this young kid came in, 16-year-old kid. He came in with his hair all bandaged up. See the blood, still coming down from his face, The kid had done a robbery, and he was a junkie, a sick kid. 16 years old, They don't have no consideration for that kids anyway, While he was over there, he was asking for medication, He wanted to see a doctor because his head was ready to blow up, So I told a couple of cops, they said, oh, he got to wait till midnight shift, Midnight shift come, the kid's still in pain, in the cell, I asked him, he said, no, you have to wait till morning, So the kid died at 5 o'clock in the morning, So then they want us to sign affidavits, we saw that the kid died, on the way to the hospital, all sort of things, I refused, because my mind right there, I thought, it could happen to me, it could happen to you, it could happen to your kid, it could happen to my kid, And I refused, so I got jammed up.
They hit you in the chest or in the side with their elbows, poke you with the nightstick. And after a couple of times, you start to feel it. Especially in delicate spots like the stomach and the ribs. They dig up and under. It doesn't leave much of a mark. There's nothing you can really show for it, but you feel it inside.
Columbia University professor of law, Monrad Paulson.
Well, poor children have a great deal of difficulty in the courts and with the police in this country, partly because the court system is, of course, set up in general with adversary procedures, and these procedures require that the defendants have certain resources, such as lawyers and persons to help cases be investigated, and typically poor people are without such resources. It's also true that the slum areas, I think, are more heavily patrolled by police, and for that reason we see in part for that reason, we see the statistics of arrests much higher in slum areas than other areas. And then, let's face it, the temptation to commit certain kinds of crimes, such as thefts, would be much greater on the part of youngsters who have very little and who are constantly told in this society that it's very desirable to have things. Every time they look at the television, they see some new toy or some new thing that they ought to have and have no way of getting it except to take it.
In Washington, D.C. this spring, a shooting occurred which points up as tragically and as accurately as anything can the current state of police and youth relationships. Rufus Mayfield, today head of a youth-oriented anti-poverty agency, was a witness. According to the police, several boys allegedly stole a bag of cookies from a neighborhood supermarket. When a policeman approached, they defiantly threw the cookies on the ground. A struggle ensued between the officer and one of the boys, Clarence Booker. The police version states that during the struggle for the officer's gun, the revolver discharged, a bullet entering the boy's back. Rufus Mayfield's version is markedly different.
The officer reached down in his holster and grabbed his gun. And so he got his gun around about this high. So he said, so Clarence reached and grabbed the gun. So they got to struggling with the gun. The gun was in Clarence's face a little while, then the gun was in the officer's face. And so that went on for around about 30 seconds. So I told Clarence to let the gun go and run. So the struggle had got around about over to this far, right here. And so Clarence finally let the gun go. So when he let the gun go, I told him to run. So he had ran around about a couple of feet, around about over here. So the officer say, run if you want to. And he fired his first shot into the ground. So I told Clarence to run because I didn't think the police shooting for some cookies. So he had ran all the way over here. The officer shot his second shot and hit Clarence in the back. And so Clarence turned towards his left and took off his cap. We ran down a little further. I told Clarence to follow me. So we ran down a little further, and the officer shot another time. So we ran down there under the bridge. Clarence ran straight on through here, and he fell on the tracks. The officer was standing over Clarence with his gun and told him told us to get back or he would blow his brains out. So Clarence told him that he was shot. So the officer say, nigga, where are you shot at? He said, in my back. So the officer stuck his hand back there, said, nigga, you ain't shot, get up from there. Then he took him to the police station, and we went up there, and they had him on the ground floor. And then the ambulance came and took him to the hospital, and he died around 20 minutes later.
Immediately after the inquest which cleared the officer, protest meetings were organized, one by the youngsters, another by a group known as the Twangers, led by James Lee, men who have all had some adverse contact with the law but are today clearly self-respecting and influential with local youth. And finally, by some of the adults who had known the 19-year-old victim. Throughout was a common litany of anger about the role of the Washington police.
But now I would like for you to attentively listen to this committee, give you their thoughts about the Booker death, if you will, including the inquest.
Not only was he shot to death, he told the officers he was shot while lying on the ground before he ever went to the precinct, and they completely ignored it. One officer admits, and that's really something, that he heard the youth say that he was shot. But nobody investigated him, and because they didn't see any blood, half a quart of blood was found in his lung, and the bullet was lodged there. If he had gotten to a hospital, there is a good chance he might have lived. So that this is really a serious business.
I state that we don't recruit individuals who are not psychologically tested to find out their likes, their dislikes, their ability to cope with the Negro. As everyone in this room knows, the District of Columbia at this day and age is 65% black. Of this 65% of black people, 85% of us have had conflict in one form or another with the law. We are forced to, because we got to eat. There's no one in here going to see a child hungry. There's no one in here going to see his baby sit outdoors or crying because he's sick and can't get his medicine. There's no one here going to face these things. I am not.
I think the worst thing we could have is have a mixed police force out here, because that Negro police officer will show his tail every time for that white police officer. We are safer sometimes when that white police officer and the Negro police, when both of them together, because they'll come up there to you and show off in front of that white police officer and grab you and punch. You don't have to worry about the white police punching, because he can't fight.
No one likes violence. You know this as well as I do. You don't want to fight no more than I do. It makes no sense. It does make sense for me to hit you in the head with a baseball bat. I'd rather play ball with you. In the back alley here, when we play ball, the troopers tell us you can't catch ball. There's a stinking, obsolete law that says a missile can't be thrown in the alley. Right. But isn't it more sense to play ball and throw bricks through a window?
Right. I feel like this, that the average police on the beat should know how to conduct themselves, know how to handle us young people. Because pretty soon, we're going to be, taking over this world because we're growing up too. As far as I'm concerned, it was, real bad on the police department. And, we're not going to exactly give them our trust. They're going to go around shooting us in the back like dogs. And like I said before, we're not going to stand for it. If they want an all-gun battle, we can take that too.
Yeah, right?
Within weeks, almost prophetically, much of America became an armed camp with gun battles between the police and the poor emerging as one of the few dialogues they held all summer. Riots, many of them sparked by the charges of police brutality lighting the long fuse of ghetto deprivation, exploded throughout the country. Cleveland, New Haven, Buffalo, Plainfield, and Detroit sustained scenes like these. In Newark, which suffered through 4 days of street combat, during which time 26 civilian obituaries were recorded. An early step taken after order had been restored was to pass $1 million appropriation for new anti-riot weapons. Said one Newark resident of the police, "It's their job to keep law and order, not to beat us with 3-foot sticks and break our heads. When we talk about police brutality, it's because we have lived through it. But we don't seem to be getting through. We just don't seem to be getting through."
Walk up to that kind policeman, the very first one you meet, and simply say, "I've lost my way, I cannot find my street, but I know my name and address and telephone number too." Then he'll be kind and help you find the dear ones who wait for you.
Oakland police spokesman Robert Kazad.
Well, in answer to the charge of police brutality, I think I don't like to deal with statistics, but I think we must. In 1964, it was a study showed that out of the entire United States, 1 out of 10 police officers was assaulted in the line of duty, and 1 out of 24 police officers received injuries serious enough to be off the job as a result of these injuries. In Oakland in that same year, we had 1 out of 3 officers assaulted in the line of duty, and 1 out of 5 officers was required to take time off from his job as a result of those injuries. In that particular year, we lost 561 man days as a result of assaults on police officers. The important thing to remember and consider in this instance is the fact that during the same period of time, there was not one proven case of police brutality against a civilian. So I think when we talk about brutality, we shouldn't be talking about police brutality. We should be talking about brutality of the citizen on the police officer.
In East Palo Alto, California, a different means is used to define and remedy, where necessary, the charge of police brutality. Innovator of a weekly dialogue between police and youth is Lieutenant William Moran, who tells why he believes it's so essential.
We're trying to show people in this area that we're human beings, and it's a two-way street when I'm working with our deputies, so they can understand the type of people they're working with and why some people have the feelings about police that they have, so that we can resolve some of the feelings that these people have about police departments.
This fella, he was standing up to Derrybell talking to his friends, And so 2 of the cops got out the car. Okay, he's standing there talking. They're going to come over and ask him something. And I guess, I don't know what he said back to him. But the next thing I know, I see him got him on the ground, stomping him in his chest and kicking him. And that's not right at all. Now, if something like that happened on Woodside, they wouldn't have that kind of brutality.
We have nothing to hide on the thing. We're trying to be fair. If one of our policemen is wrong, we want to know it as quick as anybody else. And I think this is something that you have to get across to the people, that you have to establish a trust.
And Bill, he gonna tell everybody that The sheriff department from San Mateo, Redwood City was down here, and San Francisco. There wasn't nobody but the sheriff department down here.
Who did it, the newspaper?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you, I mean, you think it's the sheriff's office that's making these big stories and changing the story, or you think it's the newspapers? Well, you know, tonight I hear some pretty good bitching about what the police are doing wrong. I think there's nothing wrong with this. I mean, if you guys think that this is wrong, what can we do to correct it?
You know, give us a break. We ain't gonna tab nothing.
If this is all they have to bitch about, it sure isn't very much. Really.
But why don't say?
Sure, you can say something.
But cops think they cool.
Huh?
You walk in the store, you know, they come up to you. You can't even touch not one thing. You can't touch it without them coming over there. Hey, leave you alone. You touch it again, kick you out the store. And if they see you back there again, they just, you know, take you up to police station, just talk to you, and then they say, like when we was walking in the Mayfield Mall today, cop said, we just, you know, took one foot down the escalator. Cop said, okay, get out. And all he said is, next time you do it, we're going to throw you to jail. That's all he said.
Did you see that? Oh,
I think any time you can get kids sitting down with policemen and they can find out policemen are just human beings who are out doing a job, you're going to have a better attitude in the community. I've been in police work for 20 years, policemen to find out what policemen are all about. I don't think this is just in a minority neighborhood. I think this is in almost all neighborhoods. And I think this is the most important. Talk to people, know the people. It's pretty hard to start riots if you can call the people by name and ask them to go home. A lot has to do with being familiar with the people you're working with.
That was that. I went on about my business. But you see, they followed me to say about 3 blocks.
Another area of justice and the poor, in which a double standard has been charged, is in the American system of bail. Here it is said a cynical distinction is made between the poor defendant. As opposed to the middle class or affluent man, who can be out on bail in a matter of hours, the indigent is kept in jail, sometimes for months, unable to raise even the minimal price of liberty, unable to adequately build his case prior to trial. The system of bail, whereby the defendant or his family puts up money and collateral to buy pre-trial liberty, is affirmed in the Bill of Rights. However, in that document, there is also the clear-cut injunction that excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishments inflicted. A pioneer bail reform organization is the Vera Institute of Justice. Herbert Sturz, director, comments.
Well, the bail system as constituted in the United States pretty much results in that a poor person stays in jail until trial. A person connected with, say, organized crime or has money is at liberty before trial. These persons are presumed innocent. They've been convicted of nothing. At this point, their crime is that they're poor. There are many consequences that flow from being in jail before trial. Your family may have to go on welfare. If you bought something on time, you lose that. Then you probably can get in trouble and pay a penalty for what you may owe on a television set. You can't consult with a defense lawyer. You can't seek out witnesses. There's more pressure on you to plead guilty for a crime. And as I think we all know, large numbers of persons are not convicted after trial. And cases are dismissed all the time. Still others are convicted, they were guilty, and are given a suspended sentence. More persons, I think, spend time in jail before trial than after conviction in this country.
What can happen when men spend endless months in jail, though presumed innocent? In New York City's Tombs, prison priest Father Donald Hagen.
You have some men here for the first time who actually have breakdowns, who actually commit suicide. Then you have newcomers in here, or people in here for maybe the second or third time, and then they began to listen to the other prisoners who have been here over and over again. I think the bail system as it stands there is very bad, because the bails that are set are way out of proportion to what the man can possibly raise.
One of the most common bails set is at $1,000. The premium costs $25. Father Hagen puts this price into the perspective of the poor man.
Now, $25 doesn't sound very much, but when you are working for a week-by-week salary, and every penny it takes of that salary to exist upon, $25, is a lot of money. And then to have this collateral, it means you've got to know somebody that has a savings account or somebody who owns property. Automobiles and things like that are not acceptable as collateral. This collateral that's put up is not available to the person that puts it up until the end of the trial. And the trial can go on for months.
In my own experience, I've known of people that have spent a year.
Attorney Morris Summers. At the time this was filmed, his client had already spent 9 months in the Tombs, unable to raise bail.
I have a couple of cases right now in the Tombs awaiting trial. I have one where a boy was picked up last November on at the request of a foreign state, in this case North Carolina, charged with a relatively minor offense in North Carolina. And here in late July, he is still awaiting the action of the authorities in North Carolina. And although bail has been set for him, he's unable to make bail. And conceivably, when he's brought back, if he ever is, to North Carolina, and he goes to trial on the case that he's charged with in North Carolina and convicted, he's likely to get less time there than he's doing right here in the Tombs awaiting extradition. You'd have to be less than naive to believe that, so far as the bail system is concerned, that you get equal justice for rich and poor. Essentially, bail is the demand by the people, by the prosecutor, that the defendant put up sufficient money to ensure his reappearance in the courtroom when he's wanted. Now, quite obviously, the rich man has very little difficulty in putting up money. He certainly equates his liberty at a much greater price than the trouble he may have getting the bail, so that you very rarely find a man who is in anything like easy circumstances in the Tombs.
One rarely finds them in jails anywhere in the country. In Columbus, Ohio, the sheriff talks candidly about the human problems of detention for the poor. He is Stacy Hall.
We are unable to house decently, adequately, these prisoners. There are times in which we have to take and place our prisoners in the bullpen, which is commonly known, and mattresses are placed on the floor. And therefore, the only place these men have to stay is in the cell block, what we call bullpen. We need this bullpen. Otherwise, we'd have to stand them on their head. It's a darkened area, and it's a place of no sanitary conditions whatsoever. In other words, this is a jail which reminds you of an old Bastille. It is very inadequate and very unsecure, unsafe, unhealthy, and just about as bad as you would want to imagine any place. The average prisoner coming into our jail on a felony, if he cannot make bond, he is there a matter of 3 to 4 to 5 weeks before his case is presented to the grand jury. After the grand jury returns a true bill and indictment, then it is a matter of maybe weeks before he goes to court. And if he goes to court, there may be a continuation of the case because of witnesses not being available. Therefore, it is very possible that a person can be here a year before ever going to trial. Bondsmen refuse to go their bail. There is no security to be placed at the bondsman's hand so that he can be guaranteed his money in case the person should take off. And we have quite a few that remain in jail because of lack of money or a poverty condition in which the family or the bondsmen are not able to make bond for the individual.
Critics say that in too many cases, the decision of freedom or detention lies in the bondsman's hands. that they even make it easier for affluent members of the underworld to obtain a bond than they do for the less celebrated and less solvent. Bondsmen are quick to deny these charges, saying they are helpful to the poor, that only the judge has the power of bail or jail. Appellate Court Judge Bernard Botine, New York's top-ranking jurist, has recommended setting lesser bails for indigent defendants. Nevertheless, he concedes,
it takes time to indoctrinate an entire court system into utilizing new procedures and into accepting it. We judges are prone to sit on our status quo, and so while a great many judges have fallen right into the spirit of it and follow the recommendations in the reports, others are somewhat resistant, and these are all men of goodwill, but of different backgrounds and different temperaments.
this collision between the poor and men of different backgrounds and temperaments generally means long pre-trial waits in jail. When you can't raise bail and collateral, you become a guest of the state. There are certain bail reforms now underway in the country. The programs of New York's Vera Institute of Justice are designed to obtain the release of indigent defendants without bail if reliable information about their community roots is presented in time to the judge. The program is basically known as ROR, Release on One's Own Recognizance. Vera Director Herbert Sturs explains.
All we do is something very, very simple in the Manhattan Bail Project, and which is now spread throughout the United States and is perhaps in 150 jurisdictions. And that is, verified information is better than no information. And we simply bring forward to the court knowledge that where this fellow lives, where he's been working, who he lives with. This is the kind of information. And they now have something to hang their hat on when they make a decision.
And you don't think you could raise any amount of bail, even $5 or $10 through friends?
Maybe a little we could raise.
At the Brooklyn House of Detention, volunteers of the New York section of the National Council of Jewish Women use the Vera techniques in interviews with young prisoners.
Okay. Are you a high school graduate?
Yes, I am.
Oh, well, that's very good. And before you were arrested, you were unemployed for how long?
1 week.
In certain cases, such as this, they recommend pretrial liberty if the accused boy will report every day to his home or a police station or a minister.
Check employment?
Yes.
Which would you prefer to do the most?
I'd rather report to the minister.
A Vera bail reevaluation interview with the wife of the accused, which will prove successful in obtaining the defendant's release.
For sure they could raise towards his bail.
$50.
$50? Do you have any children?
Just one.
How old is the child?
8 months old.
What's going to happen to the family in the event that he can't make his bail, or even if we aren't successful in having his bail reduced? Is there anybody else you could turn to have the bail reduced, or to have the money raised towards his bail?
Not at all.
No one else at all?
No.
You have no savings or any money that could be used towards the bail?
No.
Hello, Ann. How are you, babe?
Another Vera project gives the accused an opportunity to contact his family from the prison itself in order to raise bail. The Vera aide, through an agreement made with detention officials, monitors all calls to make certain no witnesses are intimidated. Such is hardly the case in this rather desperate husband-wife conversation.
Listen, I go to court the 26th, be in court, 1B. Did you check on it? Huh? What have you been doing? What have you been doing? Well, listen, how about calling Mike, man, and check on it anyway, you know? Call Mike.
All right, let's go. Move out. Let's go. Everybody, move it out.
At the Tombs, another official who favors bail reform was asked if he thought the Vera plan would ultimately make the detention facility obsolete. New York City Commissioner of Corrections George McGrath.
We can't forget the other side of this picture. There are individuals who are a menace to the community. And this is what these kinds of places are designed to hold. And I think we will always need some kind of physical facility, not with the steel and bars that are present here in this institution, not quite as secure as this is. We don't need this kind of extreme security, but we will always need some kind of a facility where human beings can be under control. There's a minimum percentage of people that will always need this, and I don't think we'll ever reach the point where we can do away with detention facilities entirely. But actually, it's not natural. What we should have are horizontal facilities with space so that human beings can get outdoors, have fresh air, and live approximately as they might back in the community while they're confined, so that we wouldn't be living, in a sense, in the kind of monkey cages that we're satisfied with throughout the nation when we build facilities such as this.
Earlier this year, the President's Commission on Law Enforcement and the Administration of Justice took a long look at another facet of justice and the poor. The Commission stated, "Finally, there is evidence that the imposition of the death sentence and the exercise of dispensing power by the courts and the executive follow discriminatory patterns. The death sentence," said the Commission, "is, quote, disproportionately imposed and carried out on the poor, the Negro, and the members of unpopular groups." The Presidential Commission also pointed out inequities toward the poor at the opposite pole, in the lower courts. The Commission called them abominable bargain counters, in which court-appointed attorneys urged their clients to plead guilty in a misguided effort to help the judge clear the court calendar. The Commission also cited unqualified judges and interminable delays as other instances where justice does not appear to proffer a dispassionate or even compassionate hand. At the center of the American system of justice is the quality of counsel a defendant receives from either a court-appointed lawyer or a private attorney. The director of the Legal Services Division of Mobilization for Youth believes that when it comes to the poor, many public defenders are inadequate and inexperienced, while many private attorneys are simply not involved. Harold Rothwax.
Well, the private bar needs money to survive. The private practitioner, even the large Wall Street law firm, have overheads, have secretaries they have to pay, like their vacations, like nice homes, and I'm not blaming them for that, but it requires that they represent people who have money, and that they not represent those people who don't. You can ask the private bar, and we have in the past, and they have responded in part with volunteer services. But volunteer services must always take second place to the making of their own livings and to the interests of their paying clients. And they cannot, in a volunteer way, stay in this area in a continued, broad-based way that will seek manifest and real changes for poor people.
Mr. Rothwax was asked to be precise. Was he saying that for the private attorney it was a matter of conscience or one of upper middle class survival?
Well, I think it's I think that conscience is affected by the way in which you earn your living. I suppose that you're sensitive to the way you meet your needs, and I suppose if you continue catering to a particular clientele in a particular area of life, that you don't have the time or the interest or the disposition for giving the time and energy that's necessary in other areas. But I think that the basis for the private bar's absence in this area is primarily an economic one, and whatever else flows from it is economically based.
Speaking of the poor and your single practitioner,
Attorney Julius Shore responds.
The relationship is a very difficult one because your lawyer, well, he isn't generally, or most lawyers aren't generally busy with corporation law. They do represent a lot of people that are in business. Their days are taken up with sometimes trial work, preparation, conferences, closings of all kinds. And there's very little room for a poor person to be brought in. The only possibility, or very often the only possibility, is if one of your clients has someone working for him who got himself into a jam of some kind and asks you as a favor to help the man out. And it's been my experience, certainly in my office, that we do help where we can, but the opportunity is so limited.
Opportunities are limited also for millions of poor Americans who can't make bail, and who, according to one judge, are terrified and frustrated by our unequal system of law. What are the solutions to the lack of equal justice under the law for the poor? A pragmatic alternative is offered by Mobilization for Youth. This federally funded anti-poverty agency recently introduced to New York ghettos the idea of the neighborhood law office, in this case compactly housed and staffed inside a specially adapted trailer truck. Complainants come in from the streets, get a lawyer's attention, counsel, and subsequent action without having to pay a fee.
They had ripped them out of the wall. The plaster was down in the sink. The door was open when we came back.
The neighborhood law concept is designed to reach all the poor, not only those who might see the inside of a jail, but all those who might also be doomed to a life of despair without legal knowledge or protection. Supreme Court Justice William O. Douglas talks of this basic injustice.
I would think this, those who study the law very closely will find that many of the laws have a built-in bias against the poor because the poor have never been articulate. The establishment has been articulate. What is the establishment? The establishment is the loan companies, the banks, the mortgage companies, the landlords, and property interests. So one of the great problems that those who represent the poor in the oncoming decades are going to have is a legislative battle to iron out many of the inequities in the laws as they apply to the poor.
One of the laws that has ironed out some of the inequities, at least as they apply to slum housing, is New York State Article 7A. Again, it is a way of utilizing the neighborhood law concept. Mobilization for Youth's attorney in this field, Nancy LeBlanc, talks to a tenant.
We took care of the heat. Yeah. And where the roof was done. You know, they did the roof this week, the beginning of the week. Yeah. There shouldn't be any more leaking from the roof. We've done some plumbing. Yeah, quite a bit of plumbing, actually. About $1,800 worth of plumbing already, even though you can't see it. We're just about to begin on the plumbing and the plastering. Okay, I gotta go see the rest of the tenants.
Article 7A enables 1/3 of the tenants operating through the courts to force the landlord to make urgently needed repairs by the simple expedient of placing their rent monies in escrow with a court-appointed administrator. The administrator is tenant Michael Katz.
The whole area, the wall all the way down in the hallway, has been leaking.
Well, when you called me, you said 2 feet.
It's still wet now.
Oh, damn. When you called me, you said it should be 2 feet, and I know that the letter says an area 2 feet wide behind the rain leader. So that if it's that wide, he's done it. He's complied with the terms of the contract. If it's not that wide, well, then he hasn't. If we require it to be wider, we'll have to ask him to come back and pay him a little more to do it.
Well, we can wait a month and see if the plaster dries out.
Yeah.
Article 7A has far-ranging possibilities, according to Miss LeBlanc.
I don't think Article 7A will ever cure slum conditions, but it can certainly make a major difference in the lives of the tenants in a building where you have a 7A proceeding. One of its most important advantages is that it allows the tenants to take the initiative. All of the other legislation related to trying to cope with the problems of slums is defensive. It requires either a city agency to take action, or it requires the landlord to serve a dispossess, and then you defend and say, I don't have to pay my rent because the building's in such bad shape. But none of it ensures that any repairs will get done. It only operates on the principle that if you apply enough pressure, then maybe the landlord will make the repairs. The 7A proceeding, on the other hand, allows the tenants to take the building away from the landlord for the sole purpose of having repairs made, so it guarantees that there will be some repairs made. This is one of the real opportunities for both the people in the community, the tenants themselves, for community action people, and organizers and lawyers to all work together to try to deal with some of the major problems that face poor people living in slums today.
The neighborhood law office concept, now beginning to flourish throughout the country, had its roots in Philadelphia, where a benchmark decision by Judge Raymond Pace Alexander has given it impetus.
Something had to be done to change the attitude of the feeling of the poor people, and I say poor, I mean all those without funds as well as without the necessary education to understand, change their thinking of the law as as their protector, whereas in fact the law to them for generations has been the adversary, the law against them, never thinking of the law as their protector.
What is being done toward improving the quality and scope of counsel who represent the poor? Though the criticism has been sharply made that many court-appointed lawyers are either too inexperienced or simply overwhelmed by the volume of cases they must handle, Philadelphia's public defender system has long been regarded as one that is properly implemented. Within the Neighborhood Law Office complex, a division known as the Defender Association of Philadelphia has some 40 experienced lawyers available for full-time trial work. One of them now defends a client during a trial on a drunken driving charge with a vigorous cross-examination of the arresting officer.
Would you describe his talking to you as incoherent?
Yes.
Now, I refer you to your own report, and you tell me what you checked under speech.
Left.
Now, is there a box there to check incoherent?
That is correct.
And you didn't check it, did you?
I could have checked...
Just answer the question.
No.
Is there any check on it at all?
What of the involvement of the private attorney in defending the poor in a court of law? An involvement which many critics have felt is generally superficial and apathetic. In Houston, Texas, an ambitious new project of the Houston Legal Foundation was created to provide indigent defendants with first-class, experienced private counsel. Its modus operandi is simple and effective. All private attorneys in the city are registered, their names fed into a UNIVAC machine. Once it is established that a defendant cannot afford counsel, the foundation recommends 2 attorneys' names to the court via rotation, with an attempt made to assign more experienced attorneys to more serious cases. Judge Sam D. Johnson is the director.
In many instances, we find that these attorneys that have not been there before, that work for either large firms or with large firms or large companies, go there with a sense of responsibility that is not normally found in providing such representation. Our younger attorneys are enabled to obtain very valuable experience through this program, and we're finding that some of our older attorneys are having quite an awakening as well. Attorneys have told me that for the first time they have a client that really needed them. For the first time, a client with eyes and feet and hands. And for the first time, a client that had only one help, that being the assigned attorney.
Another recourse for the poor to gain equal justice is the office of the Ombudsman, a Scandinavian concept meaning a kind of people's watchdog. Nassau County, Long Island, presently has the only ombudsman in the country, but other states plan to establish the office. Here, former Judge Samuel Greason explains that his job
is to take care of the complaints of the little man, the man in the street, the ordinary citizen who has no political influence, no political ties, and who has had possibly an unhappy experience with some agency of government, either in the town, the county, special districts, or other agencies.
Thus far, over 600 citizen complaints about the alleged abuses of official agencies and courts have been heard and tended to. Soon, Nassau County voters will be asked to keep or eliminate this office, says Judge Greason.
I think it's the concept of having some place where the ordinary citizen can go with his complaints, his problems, is a tremendous thing for the average citizen, one that's going to restore the confidence of the citizen in his own government and possibly destroy the idea of too many people that unless you know somebody unless you're a politician yourself, unless you have the power to put in a fix, you're not going to get anywhere. And it's a very unhappy situation to have that feeling exist, and it exists over the entire country.
Perhaps the larger problem still remaining is to restore or shape the confidence of youth and adults and in their system of justice. In New York, an agency known as LEAP has been giving youngsters of the ghetto legal support while encouraging them to have a voice in their own affairs. Local police precincts, which they once called butcher shops, are no longer menaces to these children of the poor. If a youngster is brought in, he can contact LEAP for immediate legal help. Often the police will release him in the custody of LEAP personnel. LEAP Director Larry Cole.
Kid knows that we are going to back him up whatever happens. Like my parents told me, and probably most of everyone else's parents have told them, that either implicitly or otherwise, that whatever happens, somebody's going to be there. Now, these kids live with the very real fear that tomorrow morning, if something happened to them and they vanished, nobody would know. That's a terrible fear. That's probably the ultimate fear anybody could have, is that they don't exist. These kids exist, and they exist very definitely. And they know that whatever happens, we're going to be backing them. And that goes for court, that goes for school, that goes for medically, that goes for summer, that goes for everything that the kids need to have. There's somebody going to be backing them up.
Buenas tardes. Buenas tardes. Buenas noches. Buenas noches. Es un señor, es una señora, es una...
In this same spirit, call it communication, call it newspeak, between the law and the poor, New York's police department is now conducting conversational Spanish classes for any members of the city's finest wishing to enroll. Known as Operation Friend, the class convenes for at least an hour each week. As one patrolman puts it, it's a beginning. If we can both talk the same language literally, we can both talk the same language about many other things.
¿Cómo está usted? ¿Cómo está? Estoy bien, gracias.
Por aquí está usted, el edificio aquí.
Patrolman Charles Cerati of the 24th Precinct finds his well-meaning efforts, syntax aside, winning new rapport with residents on his beat in that section of New York known as Spanish Harlem.
Hasta semana que venga lo tengo aquí a escribir. Escribe, sí. Pues la calle, la basura en la calle, no, es malo, ¿no? Ah, ya veo, sí. La basura, la calle está limpia. Sí, pero...
The tragedy remains, however, that instead of trying to find new ways to communicate with the poor, most police departments are seeking whatever is newest and most ominous in anti-riot control. This vehicle, called the R2, is reminiscent of the most imaginative of James Bond weaponry. As shown in film supplied by its developer, some of the R2 features include, quote, gun ports and turret for launching tear gas grenades, and capacity for a 15-man riot squad. Concludes the manufacturer, no special training is required to operate this vehicle. At the highest court in the land, Justice William O. Douglas reflects on the current state of justice and the poor.
We're in pretty bad condition, I think, at this level, because the poor are, in many respects now, completely oriented away, alienated from society, embittered, and disappointed, and distrustful. So it's going to take a lot of extraordinary fine men and women, dedicated men and women, who believe in humanity and who have the goodwill and the dedication of St. Francis and those who walk humbly to bridge this awful gap that has arisen.
Another man responsible to the poor every day believes the answer is less spiritual. Harold Rothwax.
The law does not exist without lawyers insofar as poor people are concerned. It is in many ways a mockery, a delusion, and a cruel delusion at that. But there is no law unless the poor man knows about his rights, has access to lawyers, and those lawyers are capable and willing to act in a prolonged, persistent, sustained, continuing, unremitting exercise of advocacy on their part. And that doesn't exist today. I think the Neighborhood Legal Services mark its furthest advance thus far, but there's still plenty of room for improvement.
Finally, a suggestion to heal the enormous chasm between the poor and the privileged is suggested by a youth. He maintains the way to get justice is through organization and a loud lament.
I think the people should scream, you know, and to scream that everybody hears, so everybody scream at the same time, you know, because little organization over here and little organization over there, you know, all these problems. Look at this. How many organizations they got today? A couple of dozen maybe, right? Every borough, every place, they have a little organization, you know. Yeah, but what are they doing separated? They gotta be together, you know. Together, everybody scream, they get what they want. So I say that today is 1967, tomorrow will be 1968, and then 69, like that, you know. It's like a year is a day. That's how the years are going by, you know. But nobody cares, man. You know? All the poor, everybody that cares, you know, they can't move. They don't know nobody. See? And when you want to talk to a big shot, you know, he don't want to talk to you because you ain't on nothing, you know?
This agony, this sufferance, this fear of the law which pervades the poor and makes the concept of equal justice for all a cruel delusion, will only be corrected when police engage in real and continuous dialogues with the poor. When lawyers provide counsel not as a matter of charity, but because it is the poor man's right and the lawyer's responsibility. And when bail reforms grant the indigent the same rights as the rich. Laws, said Lord Acton, should be adapted to the benefit of those for whom misgovernment means not stinted luxuries, but want and pain and degradation and risk to their and their children's souls.
This has been NET Journal, a weekly look at the events, issues, and people of the world today.
This is NET, the National Educational Television Network.